Hello and welcome to this episode of Psychobabble, and today I thought I would have a conversation about an important and fairly uncommon disorder that is particularly relevant in the time that I'm making this recording. We are in the middle of the COVID-19 social distancing expectation, staying at home in order to reduce the transmission of the virus. And I thought that maybe a discussion about agoraphobia might be a good contextual topic to bring into Psychobabble today. So what I want to do first is kind of talk about the word agoraphobia and looking at the origins of the actual word. It's a phrase that we use, which is ideology. Now, the ideology of a particular word is its origins. Where does it come from? Whereas in English, it's many of the English languages and whatnot, the English-related languages come from the Greek and Latin. And if we look at the two pieces of agora and phobia, and we look at what each one of those mean. First, let's look at phobia. That's a commonly known one. It's from the Greek phobos, which means fear. So all of the phobias, whether the arachnophobia, fear of spiders, or in this case, agoraphobia, and we get that word from the Greek, which means the marketplace. And from this same root of agora, we get agriculture. So we can see that outside marketplace sort of component for this. Now, as we talk about this, we want to make sure we source an understanding of our of this term accurately. So we're going to use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition to come up with to explore the actual diagnostic criteria of this at kind of a surface level. So here we have the DSM criteria for agoraphobia. Its definition, basically, is a person can have a fear of public transportation, open spaces, enclosed spaces, standing in line, and being outside the home alone. Now, this is what really caught my eye when I was looking at this about what's going on in the world today in terms of what we're expected to do in terms of social distancing. So the fact that there's a virus out there can certainly make people afraid to leave their houses. In fact, they're being told to stay in their houses. So maybe, some of the people who have agoraphobia, they're like, hey, thumbs up, I've been practicing that for years. Got that all down. But then we see this interesting one, standing in line. We have some, depending on the degree to which somebody might have agoraphobia, along that continuum, there's a lot more standing in line going into the grocery stores as they're managing the total number of people that can be inside of the building and whatnot. So people might be standing in line a little bit longer than they used to before, and in different circumstances. Not only are they standing in line, but they're standing outside in line. You can see how this could maybe a triggering sort of thing. Now, the criteria goes into even more detail about these are not just like, I don't like standing in line or I don't like using public transportation. It's to the degree that it is interrupting a degree of functioning. Now, when we talk about something that meets the criteria for abnormal, there's a whole video on that to come up here, defining abnormal. And if we're going to look at something like agoraphobia, to what degree does a fear of public transportation, open spaces, enclosed spaces, standing in line, and outside the home alone qualify for you to be diagnosed? And there's 3 criteria. and that we look at in terms of just any sort of abnormality. The first, it's statistically rare. The degree to which you have it is statistically rare. There's probably quite a few people that don't like public transportation, but the degree to which they are scared of it or have an unreasonable fear is not high. So they don't fit that criteria of this being statistically rare. We're going to look at that statistics. It also interferes with functioning, meaning it keeps you from doing something. So you live in a city and you have a job across town and you don't own a car and you develop agoraphobia and you can't use public transportation. That's a big deal because that used to be the only way that you could get to work. So that functional part is there too. And then in terms of social expectations, again, I'll use the city example. It's fairly common for society, particularly in large cities, to encourage, and an expectation of that society is to use public transportation. Now, a person who has a tremendous amount of fear about public transportation, in this particular instance, a person with agoraphobia with that particular characteristic, would be sort of, let's say, in violation of those social norms. So all three of those, we have the statistically rare level of fear, we have the functional interference with that, that comes along with that. I can't get to work, or I can't leave the house, or those kinds of things. And then we have the social expectations of what's everybody expected to do when we're living in this kind of situation. Now, this falls under a general category of disorders that we call anxiety disorders. Now, anxiety disorders include all kinds of ways in which people experience anxiety, a stress, a level of concern, a heightened awareness, and physiological responses that go along that with it. It can be very uncomfortable for people who have anxiety disorder. Now, specific to agoraphobia, we have, we're looking at maybe a 1.7% of the population of adolescents and adults have some degree of agoraphobia. It has specifically role impairment, meaning individuals who can't use public transportation, can't get to work, they can't go into open spaces, so in between their car and going, let's say, to work or to school or to meet people or something, that's not happening. An individual with agoraphobia right now would not only, with standing in line, would be really challenged in today's world of us standing in line waiting to get into Walmart or wherever they're going. So role impairment is one of the major factors that we see impacted by agoraphobia. And the concept of panic attack, which is part of the anxiety constellation of the disorders, and panic attacks may or may not be a part of agoraphobia, just like some of the other phobias and just like some of the other anxiety disorders. An individual could have this to a degree that if you just plop them into the middle of a subway, they would have a panic attack with an intense degree of distress, a sense that impending doom, a sense of if I don't change the situation and get out of it, I'm going to die. That's often the way you hear people talking about what a panic attack feels like. And it has physiological, like I have people who have panic attacks, or even just looking at anxiety, they sometimes feel like their body's betraying them. You're getting all worked up, the body's getting all worked up, it's going into its fight or flight response, the heart rate's going up, the sweaty palms, and you're looking around like, there's no reason for this, why am I doing this? It's almost like my body is betraying me. And that furthers the difficulty in functioning, in being able to deal with it. It even interferes with using some of the methodologies that we would advise somebody to use when they're in treatment. So let's segue here for treatment. Take a quick look at what we can actually do for this. The treatment for agoraphobia is similar to treatments for all anxieties. One of the more successful treatments that we can have is CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy. Now, cognitive behavior therapy focuses on, it's a behavioral technique that focuses on an individual's thinking process. And so The therapist will raise the individual's awareness of the internal dialogue that's going on. They will substitute other portions of dialogue and self-talk when the individual's in a situation, recognizing particular signs within their body, and then using strategies to overcome those in the particular situation until they can then remove themselves from that anxiety. And over time, they may become adept at doing that. Again, recognizing when anxious situations, any one of those lists, they're anticipating going and standing in line, and they might be able to go through some internal processes in order to lessen the experience of anxiety in that particular situation. Now, another methodology used particularly in the phobias, but also in some of the regular anxieties, is exposure therapy, or a systematic desensitization therapy. And this is something that sometimes people do on their own. I'm just going to white knuckle my way through. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to experience the anxiety, and I'm just going to fight it internally. An individual could grab this by the horns and do that. Or it can be done with the guidance of a psychotherapist who would move you through the process of gradually, this is the systematic effort of exposing yourself to more and more close approximations of the stimulus that's causing the anxiety, and working on relaxation techniques and maybe some of the similar techniques that you would learn in CBT. And of course, there's always the use of medications. Medications to kind of, not to remove the cognitive need or the cognitive processes that are going on, but to lessen the physiological responses, which can be sometimes scary and overwhelming. I really feel like I'm having a heart attack. I really feel like my blood pressure is going up. I get headaches, and this is all very real. And that might, as I said earlier, that interrupts and it gets in the way of an individual being able to then use the behavioral or systematic desensitization skills they've been learning in psychotherapy, because they're just overwhelmed with this physiological response. So that's a little bit about agoraphobia, and an important thing to consider as we look through that list of things that people could be very anxious about at this time when we're going through the social distancing. It just can be just accentuated that much more. So thanks for watching today. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.